Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our program. I know that folks are still joining and still attaching to the audio as you do on Zoom. It's wonderful to have such a large and diverse group from across the colleges of the Fenway and beyond here with us this afternoon. So as we get settled in here and give other folks a moment to arrive, I thought I'd invite you all to put in the chat your institution and your role there, and a word or phrase to describe how you're feeling about generative AI tools like Chat GPT. So take a minute to do that, and we will admit more folks as they come in. Thanks, Lance. Yeah, definitely. Things are changing very quickly. Chat GPT 4 was just released. Pretty exciting. I asked it how it felt about itself, and it said, I have no feelings. I'm an AI. So, at least it's being honest. No emotions or metacognition, but a lot of other powers. Lots of other folks. Josh Larson's optimistic. Suzanne's feeling interested but overwhelmed. Understandable. Some serious ethical and privacy and security issues. Thanks, Sarah, for that. Great to see you, Rita Marie. Lots of possibilities. Tess is curious. Yeah, curiosity. That's such a great way to approach it. Cynthia, thanks for being here. Intrigued and concerned. Definitely mixed feelings. I think looking at this image of the machine hand touching the human hand, it evokes a lot of emotions and feelings for sure. Yeah, thanks everyone for being here. There's so many more responses coming in, which is wonderful. We're really delighted that to have so many folks here and to hear from you both in this kind of back channel chat format, as well as in the broader discussion as we go forward. So I'm just going to share this shared document. I know some of you have already seen it from the Guilt Free Book Club email list, but this shared Google Doc that I just put in the chat will take you, and I'll share that share it so you can see it. That will take you to this generative artificial intelligence and authentic assessment, practical responses to the AI revolution, collaborative notes and resources page. So we have some thought-provoking quotes to help guide our discussion today. These are all linked out to the places where they came from, or other to find more information about the thinkers behind them. This one I'm particularly proud of, Susan Bloom, Guru of Ungrading. This is a link to my podcast episode interview with her, so feel free to check that out as well. And then we have a bunch of links to practical approaches from other institutions and places that have put together some really thoughtful writing about ways that they're advising faculty, and faculty are advising each other about how to approach these new tools. And then authentic assessments can be part of our discussion, as well as kind of one framework for looking at how to design assignments and assessments for students that are meaningful and authentic, and kind of get around, as it were, some of the challenges posed by these new capabilities that we all have at our beck and call. And then if you want a deeper dive, these are some compilations of resources that just have tons of lists. As you know, there's been oceans of ink spilled over the last few months about this topic. And then this is for you. So add your favorite quotes, add your favorite articles. I see a lot of people are doing so, have done so already. A video. Thank you so much for folks who are doing that. And then at the end, we'll ask for folks to share their takeaways. So you should all have access to that document as well. And thanks, Megan, for continuing to put these things in the chat as folks come in, and thanks to everyone for continuing to use the back channel chat to share your ideas and thoughts and reactions to one another. So really appreciate that. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome, we have 3 distinguished panelists who are going to share their thoughts at the beginning of our discussion today. We have two Wentworth faculty members, Professor Juval Racelis from the School of Humanities and Professor Memo Ergezer from the School of Computing and Data Science. And then we'll welcome Lance Eaton, who's the Director of Digital Pedagogy at College Unbound and is a thought leader in this area, has published a lot on LinkedIn and other places about this issue. So let me turn the floor over to my friend, Professor Juval Racelis.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. Thank you, Josh and Megan, for pulling us all together. I'm excited to share and learn from everyone about their perspectives on Chat GPT. I think we're at a moment where there is a frenzy around Chat GPT, and all the information is quite overwhelming, for me at least, in trying to make sense of it all. I come from a writing pedagogy background. I actually had the pleasure of meeting Susan Bloom just a few weeks ago at a conference on writing and learning more about her perspectives on ungrading. And I think that can help lead our conversation on writing assessment as well. And so, yes, I look forward to learning and hearing more from everyone.
Thanks so much, Juval, and I'm definitely excited to hear about your conversation with Susan Bloom and the ways that we can bring in an ungrading mindset into this, the ways that we're engaging with this new tool. So let me turn the floor over to Professor Memo Ergezer.
Thanks, Josh and Juval. So first, I have to give a shout out to my colleagues I see here, Arman, Dave, Joshua, VG. Good to see you all. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts as well. Personally, I'm in the School of Computing Science, Computing and Data Sciences, associate professor teaching many AI and data science courses. And my dissertation was in AI, but specifically in optimization and evolutionary algorithms. So not necessarily in generative AI. I do have to disclose that because I'm giving the CS in there. And I also wanted to, I think, make a quick note to the poster Josh you prepared. It was pretty cool. It was great to see it. It reminded me of the creation of Adam from Michelangelo. But typically, right, it's when I think the God gives life to Adam, reaching out. So usually have I think in the chapel is the God on the right-hand side, reaching out to the human, reaching up. In the poster, it was the flipped other way around, like the hand is on the right-hand side, reaching up to the human finger, the Android arm. So I don't know if you did that on purpose, but I'm curious, which way things go in the future.
Wow, what a fantastic question. And I love that as a computer science professor, you're asking a question that an art historian might ask. And no, we did not do that intentionally in terms of which hand was in which place, but it is such a good question, are the humans giving life to the artificial forms of intelligence? And in what ways in the future are the artificial forms of intelligence going to inform what it means to be human? So this is a big question for us all to consider. Thank you so much for being here, Memo. And let me welcome Lance Eaton, the Director of Digital Pedagogy at College Unbound. What do you have to say about this topic?
Hey folks, yes, so first, happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Like many of us, I have lots of thoughts. They're often contradictory in the same paragraph in my head. I think the thing that I keep, or like where I find myself is really thinking about it as a series of axes. And that like what we're all trying to do is this balancing act. And so that balancing act in my head has been, the ethical questions underlying the tool, that is generative AI, both in the inherent biases within the AI itself, and also the fact that much like Chat GPT in particular is built off of exploitative labor. It also moves into the added burden to faculty of having to work more to navigate navigate, reassess, and refigure things out. Like we haven't been doing that all through the pandemic. And then before the pandemic, there was another tool and another tool. Like, so there's like that continuum. There's the like what the tool means for rethinking assessment and authentic demonstration of learning in different disciplines. The problems and implications for using these tools that feed into challenges, and people brought this up in the chat, of like privacy, surveillance, digital redlining, and then moving kind of more towards the positive realm of continuums, like the real possibility of the tool to aid and support and guide new learning in all students. Like there's something about that I love about this tool and how it potentially unlocks like not just the hidden curriculum of higher ed, but like the hidden curriculum of the world for students who may be grappling for many different reasons, from English is not their primary language to neurodivergency to just, it's just not something that they have had exposure to. And then also like the reality that this tool is going to be part and parcel of most of the like employment landscape. And so what does that mean for our responsibility to recognize it as a tool, very similar to like the computer, and not be like, or the internet, these aren't necessarily fads that are going away. So that's a lot of like my initial thinking and considering around all this.
Thank you so much, Lance. You raised so many very deep and important issues and questions and ethical concerns and considerations around this issue. So what I'd love to do now is just open up the floor to folks in the Zoom call to either share your perspective, your thoughts, or to pose a question either to the group or to one of our panelists or somebody else who's said something that you're interested in. I'll kick it off just by asking Juval to tell us a little bit more about what you started talking about at the beginning with regard to ungrading, authentic assessment, and your thoughts on that as it relates to this topic.
Absolutely. So I was recently in Chicago at the 4Cs conference, which is a conference for writing and communication. And at that conference, I attended a workshop with Susan Bloom talking about, led by Susan Bloom, not with Susan Bloom, led by Susan Bloom on ungrading and really focusing on understanding how grading in many ways can sometimes be demotivating to students, and how do we better understand what authentic writing and authentic contexts mean. One avenue in understanding ungrading that she engaged us in considering was labor contract grading, which entails students being more agentive in their assessment processes. It involves metacognitive awareness and reflection of understanding where they are and really building their goal setting from the start all the way to the end. One of the benefits of this model of labor contract grading is that it, I'm trying to remember if it's labor contract grading or contract labor grading, but labor-based contract grading, that's what it's called. I have a book just right behind me. One of the benefits of it is that it really tries to examine, it really tries to meet students where they are. And it really tries to examine what power dynamic and how much voice students have in their own learning. If we understand that motivation in students is mitigated by the goals that they either see valued or devalued based on the power differential between the student and the instructor, then the labor-based contract grading affords opportunities to give students that power and give students control of their learning. It also changes up our role as instructors. We always talk about ourselves, instructors, as facilitators, but it really moves our role as facilitators in the facilitation of providing feedback for that formative transformation to learning about the material that we're teaching, as opposed to purely assessors. And if we move further in that understanding, then we're considering how we're moving away from these contexts of policing and surveillance, as Lance had mentioned. I know that many of the conversations around Chat GPT are concerned about issues of plagiarism, issues of ethics, as many have mentioned. But what does that mean about what our assignments are? If our assignments are so susceptible to plagiarism and to being easily written by a robot, then how good are our assignments? And how good are we engaging in our students in human thinking? And I think that that goes back to that authentic assessment and that authentic creation of assignments that really consider where we're pushing our students to move forward.
Thanks so much, Juval. Yeah, it's such a rich a series of ideas inspired by that conference you went to. And I'll just tie in some of the quotes on our collaborative notes document. So in my podcast conversation with Susan Bloom, she talked a lot about motivation and how ungrading strategies kind of unlock people's inherent motivation to learn, and said that if a student's motivation is ultimately to get a good grade, because that's what they think that that class is for, then cheating is a reasonable strategy. But if their motivation is genuinely to learn, then cheating is impossible. You can't really cheat at learning something new. I thought it's interesting because it dovetails with the resource from Montclair State University. In the practical approaches, they talk about strategies to mitigate cheating / non-learning. Because ultimately that's another way of looking at it that's kind of more, I guess, student-centered, you know, and less punitive. And that goes into what Mahabali is talking about in the quote under Susan Bloom's, where she talks about creating a culture of transparent assessment and, you know, asking students to show how it is they got there and what helped them along the way, and kind of build those metacognitive skills and focus more on the process rather than just that end product. And then, of course, you know, Juval, you raised that question at the end of like, if what we're asking students to do is can be really easily done by an AI tool, then, you know, maybe we should rethink what we're asking students to do. And that's what John Warner says in this pretty, you know, thought-provoking quote, that Chat GPT can't kill anything worth preserving, which we can agree with and disagree with. I'd be curious to hear everyone's thoughts about that. So let me open up the floor to other folks to comment on this. And also, as Megan noted, feel free to use the Zoom chat to leave your thoughts as well. But yeah, the floor is open.
I'll jump in because that really resonated with me. As well, everything that you were saying, and especially I still remember back in high school and elementary school and things like that, I was given a lot of assignments just as a student that I felt like, why am I learning this? And it actually led me into IT because I started trying to find what my dad would have called shortcuts, which was not looked at kindly because he didn't fully understand technology and the use case. But I was leveraging the technology, and eventually led me into IT because I really enjoyed that side of it. But yeah, I guess that I just wanted to mention that part of it really resonated with me because the elements that I found really interesting, I didn't really need to leverage, you know, Google, or I think back then it was like Ask Jeeves and, you know, Spark Notes and things like that. I didn't really have to access that stuff because it came naturally. I became very intrigued and I did the research and I became enveloped in it. Whereas other elements that I was like, why do I have to even go through this whole process? Like, it's clearly written right here for me, and I'm just going to copy, paste, and I'll learn how to fix it in between to make it my own. And same with, you know, coming from I chose this background, or this is my actual background for a purpose, coming from a place of creativity. I know there's a lot of concern in that space for songwriters and things like that. And writers on utilizing Chat GPT just to write things. And I listened to a podcast the other day that was AI generated. It was literally using Chat GPT and then this other technology called Even Labs, which does voices. So you just copy and paste and choose what kind of tone and what type of voice, and it will sounds like they did a whole podcast without any actual people or anything. It was pretty far out. But I think without taking up taking the spotlight for too long, I really enjoy Chat GPT and some of this AI is kind of like a Kickstarter when you get into like a little bit of a roadblock, or you need to help just getting started. And because at least at the point where it's at right now, it's not going to give you everything, but at least it might put you in the right headspace.
Thanks so much, Josh. Yeah, those are all great points, and it's so important to reflect on our own experiences as a student and when we were like, what's the point of this? Or when we felt energized and creatively engaged in the work, and just try and bring more of those types of experiences into our own classrooms. Yeah, other thoughts from folks on the call?
Can I address something that Josh just mentioned? Mainly because his mic sounds like it's from NPR. That's pleasant to listen to. Interesting that you mentioned the audio you listened to that was fully generated, because the GPT-4 that just got announced, I believe, yesterday, now significantly increases the output generated by all the historical GPTs, because the GPT-1 could generate a couple sentences before breaking down. GPT-3, which has the Chat GPT, could go to few pages. Now with GPT-4, we're talking about 50 pages or so. So you're talking about now creating a screenplay, a full screenplay by these tools. And similarly, we now have tools not just to audio and video generation as well. So people realize some news channels on YouTube were fully AI generated. And in that sense, I mean, the anchors that people were listening to were not real human beings. They were generative design. So you could just write the text, give the text, and they would deliver you the news. And they've been using this in certain countries, specific YouTube channels to generate that. So, and this is all in the past few years. So this is, as you know, as just mentioned too, this is going to be going at a pretty rapid pace, and we'll be very excited to see where it goes. But yeah, thanks, both Joshes.
I could jump in here. One of the exercises that we do with our students, we build chatbots, virtual agents. They do amazing work. Now, if I wear my industry cap, our clients, our customers, or the work that our students do, can't use Chat GPT because I want Chat GPT to talk back to me, to disambiguate. If I ask, how do I pay my bill? Oh gosh, it's going to tell me exactly in wonderful ways how to pay my bill. But I wanted to ask me, do you want to pay it in full or do you want to pay it in part? What bill is it that you're trying to pay? So this conversation, as much as brilliant as it is, it's lacking a conversation that I want to have with the system.
If I may, I'm Andrew Horn, I'm in English. And one thing that I find Chat is not good at is documentation. So when asking for evidence-based arguments from students, they may be able to generate some fairly neutral prose, but they will be unable to produce a list of works cited and to cite reliable sources. So this is, at the moment, seems to be one kind of break on the use of Chat by students to produce evidence-based arguments.
I guess, can I jump back in? Just to agree with everyone? Yeah, I agree. I think currently it's reasoning skills of all the GPT tools are very limited because these are language models, right? This is not general AI that they're trying to create. They're just trying to create a language model. So anything you ask about the future or to discuss, it can only pretty much replicate what it knows, but it won't be able to extrapolate into the future. So if it asks what's the future of AI, it might say it's Chat GPT and just kind of get stuck there because it doesn't know the future of NLP in 10 years, right? It just I think it's data limited to 2020 to 2021, right? So it definitely doesn't have that intelligence. It doesn't mean that it won't get there, or another model won't get there. But I agree that that's one of the biggest limitations with these tools right now.
If I could comment, oh, sorry, Lance, go ahead.
I'll just go real quick. Like, as I said in the chat, I think, yes, we can see the limitations and also know that, like, it is only going to continue to improve, and all of us playing with it is also part of the training and improving. I would also say, if you haven't looked into the realm of prompt engineering within this discussion, like, that has been really fascinating to see that, like, so much about using it is about developing the right questions. And I think that's something in the course I'm teaching right now, which is about AI in education. And in particular, at my institution, students we are working together to recommend the usage policies for faculty and students around AI generative tools. And one thing I have them do is actually go through each week. They actually have to come up with different ways of prompting and read up about prompting, because yes, it can't, you ask it to forecast the future, it can't. And technically humans can't either, or not well, right? And also, if you find the right ways of engaging with it, you can guide it to elicit points based on that data that is up to 2021 for Chat GPT and more current for these other AI tools that are coming out there. So yes, it's limited, and also those barriers continue to be gray and move about. So I think that's also important to remember in the conversation.
To expand on some of the conversations in the chat, I know that Lynn had just, and I'd love to hear more from you, Lynn, about what you mentioned, but to connect it back to what Memo had said in the very beginning, from that art perspective of who's giving life to whom in that picture, I think we also have to consider whose voices are being dominantly portrayed in these pictures. So in the image of whom, right? When we look at these, we know that the text that's generated is almost always mainstream middle-class white voices. And so how does it erase the voices as Sarah had mentioned of our regional expressions, our dialects, our understanding of the richness that our multiple experiences bring to these perspectives. And that gets erased when we rely on robots to look at a general medium. And then to go back to another point that Lance had mentioned, this notion of privacy. How are we engaging our students in understanding what they're feeding in to these tools? Because if I know that we're feeding the tool to learn more, but are we not then perpetuating our unpaid labor in giving them more information via the very voices that we're trying to foster individually?
These are all such fascinating questions and great points and conversations. Thanks to everyone who continues the chat in the Zoom chat, continue to share resources in our collaborative notes document. And something I've become aware of is, in addition to being able to generate text in the English language in all sorts of interesting and problematic ways, as we know, kind of we create our AI in our own image, as with the beautiful and the ugly contained therein. I think we can also use these tools to generate computer code and to generate mathematical solutions. So I'd love to hear from some of our professors in mathematics, in computer science, about some of the challenges they face in authentic assessment, or in having the types of assignments they used to give students now that AI can maybe do. I see Lauren, you just came on camera.
That wasn't I need to jump in first necessarily.
I'd love to hear from you.
I mean, my comment is going to come back to in part a combination of what's already been said, which is that because this is a language model, it does not necessarily know math. It is not using math logic. I think there are difficulties in different branches of mathematics even, because if you look at, say, a introduction to proof course, so at my previous institution, the linear algebra class was also an introduction to proof course. And so you're learning to prove things like the product of two symmetric matrices is also symmetric. And when you're learning to write proofs, that is in part language already and communication of the mathematical ideas, and also the types of proofs that you have to learn with and practice with and develop those skills with is the number of different proofs that I could ask you to try to do all of that is somewhat limited, depending on how creative you get with, I've heard of people defining something new or giving something that already has a name just a completely different name, so that when somebody tries to search for a solution, they don't find it because it's not known by that name. But realistically, if I'm working with the same number of different or the same subset of linear algebra properties of a matrix, there's only so many things that I can reasonably ask before the proofs get convoluted and out of the realm of that first level of learning to do this thing that is new. And so if you ask GPT to prove that the product of two symmetric matrices is symmetric, it will do that for you. You might have to then tell it to, hey, can you actually show me all the steps? But it knows that because the proof is everywhere. And then, of course, you are, okay, I can copy it down. I am not learning how to prove. So I think the proof-oriented parts of the discipline are going to have difficulty with that, but in some ways it is still the same difficulty as we had before. The proofs were everywhere before. They're just in an easier way to access via asking Chat GPT for them. Outside of that, the more computational parts, again, we've had other tools out there. We've had things like Symbolab and Wolfram Alpha doing step-by-step solutions and things. And so some of those are also still the same problem, or just a problem of more accessibility. Some amount of interpretation is where things break down, or if you tell it, something wrong, it'll be like, oh, well, of course, you were right all along. I made a mistake. I can tell it that if I ask it for the list of the first 5 prime numbers, and then tell it that it missed one and it was clearly missing 4, it'll add 4 onto the list and tell you, of course, so I was wrong. So that's more it trying to have a conversation and to people please. I don't know. I don't have a final destination here, other than that the more we can encourage conversation and discussion about what they are learning, and the fact that they need the practice to learn the things, then maybe we can avoid resorting to, oh, I'm going to ask Chat GPT to solve this problem for me when I don't even know if it will be right.
So I just want to jump in. I'm Caitlin Federico. I'm a lecturer here at Wentworth. I teach probability and statistics. I'm teaching it right now. But professionally, I work in higher education over at Harvard Medical School as a statistician over there. And I was actually watching last week tonight with John Oliver, and he did a deep dive on artificial intelligence. If you don't watch that, it actually covered a very wide breadth of some of the concerns with AI. And I just wanted to bring up one of the notes you made about interpretation. So as a statistician, the interpretation is key, telling that data story. And I think a lot of people, even if you're not formally in math, have heard or probably heard of the saying that correlation does not equate to causation. And this is one of the areas that the artificial intelligence, that the current iteration is having a little bit of difficulty with. I saw a mention earlier in the chat about potential bias. And so currently we have artificial intelligence implemented when you're applying to say jobs or employment jobs. And it kind of learns through the resumes and then maps that to the existing data that they have to make predictions, which we already discussed is not great for the future, about who would be a good candidate. And so as it learns, sometimes it makes biased conclusions based on the correlations that it has made, based physically on the math, physically on the data, the way that it's written. So as a person who kind of understands the statistical implications of that, that's one of those areas that I'm concerned about. What are the steps of the methodology that is in this generative AI? What's happening inside so that we can see the method of madness, I will say, in a sense. What is going on so that we can kind of maybe tweak it so that it's not going to make those biased results? And then on the flip side, how do we do that in a way that doesn't infringe on other people's privacy or data storage or data security? So I think this is, it feels very wild, wild west, to use an older term, where there are no rules right now. There's no, nobody's monitoring this. There's no guardrails. There's no implements. And people right now, yes, they're using it to kind of write small assignments, or more for fun. Sometimes they'll use it for fun right now and put it on TikTok. But there's this very dangerous line where, when does the fun stop? And now we really need to think about, how are we going to use this in the professional workplace? How are we going to use this in higher education? How are we going to use this as we kind of progress? And I hope personally, just kind of mirroring what we've already said and what Lauren just said, I like to have more discussion-based learning. So at the end of my class, all of my students, yes, they had to use code to create their analysis and get their numbers, but they're now going to communicate that physically in a presentation. So they have to design it themselves. And yes, they can use Chat GPT maybe to write their slides, but the actual art of communication from human to articulate your point is something that I hope will be more of a focus in the coming years, because that's an art, even with the advent of computers, that maybe we've kind of lost with texting. And so I'm kind of hopeful that we can use these tools to now focus on building out those basic foundational principles of communication, which exist in every field.
Caitlin, what a good point. If I could jump on that and also bring in what Dave Rosenberg had typed in regarding forecasting. It's been said that the winner of the AI race is not the country or the province that has maximum information on its people, nor the company or the university, although it does usually come from university, that has the master algorithm. But it is about making prediction. That's what I think of AI, a machine that predicts, human judges for now, that can do so with minimum data, not big data. This morning when I got up, I had barely even gotten off the bed and had my glass of water. I had this feeling it's going to be a great day. Good luck to the AI system to make that prediction with that much data. Now, the large model languages are hugely resource intensive. The electricity they're using, the carbon footprint that it uses is just immense. And that's how it is. That's fine. And Caitlin, coming to your point, well, it's Memo mentioned it, AGI, artificial general intelligence. The Alan Turing test is really the final, where you listen to two entities talking and they tap you on the shoulder and say, tell me which one was the human, which one was the machine. You're like, come on, those were two people talking. You open the curtain, one of them is a machine. It's quite a thing, and the learning method might have to change. Instead of regression, going back to see what has happened to predict the future, maybe the machine needs to somewhat look at the future and not make the same mistakes again. it's quite a thing. I want the same accuracy level with minimum data, not with big data.
I think what I'm appreciating about this dialogue is just the discussion around the learning process, and it's layered, right? It's the learning process from, that we're seeing as AI is evolving. It's our learning process as we figure out how do we integrate this into the teaching and learning environment, or, help students grapple with how they integrate it. And what I'm hearing is just the critical thinking that's happening both in this space and hopefully, and I'm curious to hear, kind of what this conversation sounds like with your students, like amongst themselves, or, how this dialogue comes into the classroom. Because I think, when we talk about the authentic assessments, it's layers, right? So it's, students can, either from AI or other sources or the web or different things, they can get content that is not necessarily theirs, that they need to figure out, how do I critically look at this? What does it mean to me? What does it mean to my experience? What does it mean to this problem, whether it's a math problem, a coding problem, or, a writing problem? And how do they use it and integrate it into what they're doing? So, and in their own voice, so that those voices come in and come through. So this is kind of just the thoughts that are running through my head, and I'm just curious to see if anybody has, any insights that they can share based on conversations with students in the classroom around this.
Like to welcome Professor Yetunde Folajimi, who I believe you're in a classroom right now with students. So tell us about your class in computer science and how you're bringing these tools into the discussion with your students.
Yes, thank you very much. 1 minute, let me remove my virtual background so that you can see my students. Okay, probably. All right, so this is, it's interesting that, and I'm excited to be part of this movements that I'm alive to as this generation. I don't know what life would be without technology, actually. I once lived when there were those things, when these things were not there. And sometimes I don't know if other people are also like me. I would begin to think, did I really survive? How did I survive when there was no mobile phone? When there was no, so now we are in the era of Chat GPT and OpenAI, and there is a lot. Just like I was telling my students, I said it's about the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's something that we should embrace with caution. And because if we don't embrace it, it's going to leave us behind, especially as faculty and students. They have the latest things and everything, and they have their way around things. So we also have to update ourselves and also have our way around it. Because now there was a time that you don't use internet for searching. You see it as cheating and everything. When we migrated to Brightspace, so you see, when we migrated to fully remote program, I was kind of cautious and wondering how my students are going to write exam without cheating. And we couldn't help it. So I had to start redesigning my questions, redesign them so that even if they go to the internet or whatever method they choose to cheat, it won't work for them, or I will know. So I think the era has also come. We cannot stop it. They are going to use it. but we also have to find a way of circumventing anything that would jeopardize our collective goal of making students learn, because Chat GPT has a lot to offer, and it is a smart way of, just like I said in the forum that we had before, there was a time we couldn't use calculators. We couldn't let students use it in class, but now students are allowed to use it. So because we now know, and students, I mean, the output is that things are getting better. The result of internet is that things are getting better. And I know that with time, Chat GPT will also make our lives to get better, both as faculty and everyone. You will know who used Chat GPT. If we provide all the resources and training and everything, then AI should also will be able to get to a level whereby it will know that, oh, this is totally plagiarized because it is attributed to Chat GPT, that there is a level of knowing that is involved. But my submission is that we just have to embrace it and collectively work together to step into the future where it is no longer about search engine, but it is a future of AI for everything. And we also have to find a way of getting into it. And thank you very much for having me and for bringing this together. It's really exciting, and I look forward to more of this.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here, and you know, along with that excitement comes some nervousness, because the world is, as you say, going to change. It already is changing, and you know, just as it's hard to remember how we lived without smartphones. You know, now it's so fully integrated into our lives. I think in you know, 10 years or whatever it is, the AI tools are going to be so fully integrated, or it's going to be hard to remember what life was like without them. And so it does seem like we have to be introducing that and having our students engage in some real dialogue around the issues around that and learning how to use it in productive ways. So yeah, what other thoughts do folks have? And by the way, Yetunde, if you want to invite any of your students to share their perspectives, that'd be wonderful as well. And while we're all here, but while you do so, does anyone else, what other thoughts have come up for folks in this discussion in response to Yetunde's comment or Tessa's question about really bringing in the student experience into this discussion?
Okay, for a sticker. Do you want to share maybe what your thought, your perspective, your experience, and your fear, your anxiety, or whatever you want? I mean, as students, you know, thank you.
Personally, I've used Chat GPT as kind of a personal tutor to help with course material that I don't fully understand. And it does a pretty good job explaining, although it doesn't actually know as much as we might think. It tends to just grab random details and tell you. So it's a bit unreliable, and you have to learn how to use it. But I think it's really great if you can't necessarily get a one-on-one with the teacher or someone's busy. I use it a lot as kind of a tutor, which I think is great.
Great. The good of Chat GPT as a tutor. Yeah.
I was gonna say, it's pretty good for like more creative stuff, like writing fiction or stories. But when you have more concrete things like mathematics or coding, I found that it'll talk about things, but like it's not easy to notice because it's very confident even when it tells you something wrong. So if you only use Chat GPT and you don't know anything, you're gonna end up writing stuff down that like someone who knows what they're talking about is gonna immediately see it's wrong.
Right. That's very correct. It's like, I also like what you said about giving you vague things, right? When you are, because it's kind of generalize the story when you, even no matter how much you try. So which means you can hardly fool someone that knows the subject matter and have the competency. Yeah. Anyone else? Right. Okay.
What is this class? What is the class that you're teaching right now?
Computer 1050. That is the Introduction to Java Part 2 class section. Nice. I mean, Part 2.
Nice. I also want to thank you because I got the phrase, the AI revolution. It was inspired by your comment in the last program we had on this topic. And I just wanted to ask you, as a futurist, to just share your thoughts about how you see us not just at the beginning of, with a new tool that can do certain things, but actually a revolution in the way society is going to work, because artificial intelligence is going to be so embedded in our daily lives in the future.
Yes. Like, we just don't have to be afraid of these things anymore. We just have to embrace it. That is my final thought. And we were once afraid. I mean, history has it that people were afraid of the Industrial Revolution, even the AI revolution, computer revolution, thinking they would take our job and everything. And we're still here today. So I think the future is going to be more juicy with this Chat GPT revolution, which I see as the fourth industrial revolution and maybe fifth and the future. And I don't know, did you have like a specific question?
No, that's perfect. That's a great answer. And I'd love to continue the conversation in the future. And thank you so much, as Tess said in the chat, for bringing your students into this conversation. It was wonderful to hear from everyone in the room, and we're glad that you were able to join us this afternoon.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Memo.
See you, Tunde. I wanted to actually echo one of the students, the last student that made a comment about the truthfulness of the answers, because this is an issue with GPT-3, and the technical term for this is the hallucinations. So GPT-3 can have hallucinations where it can generate nonsensical or untruthful data. So you can ask it to create sources, for instance, for an idea, and it can give you papers or websites that don't exist, right? Pretty much think of like children making up stuff. That's kind of how I see it. And this is, I think as these models are become more and more trusted by us, it makes it actually even more dangerous. Right, for everyone's point of view. And obviously OpenAI is very aware of this. So with GPT-4, they've been, one of their objectives was to reduce the hallucinations and increase the factual correctness of the model. But I think it's something that we all need to be aware of when we're using these tools.
Yeah, AI tools don't know the difference between truth and fiction. There's a really funny example I heard about someone asking a Chat GPT which would win in a race, a turtle or a spoon, and it said the spoon would win because turtles are slow. So although they will get better, there's still things that just humans can do, and perhaps that is a takeaway from our conversation, that we really, to focus on authentic assessment, we really want to focus on the process and on the things that really are uniquely human capabilities. So we have about 5 minutes left. I want to invite folks to take a minute, at least in our last time together, to add your takeaway, your thought to our collaborative notes document. Megan, perhaps you could pop that link in the chat again. I know people have been adding a lot of additional quotes and resources, some of your favorites, and thank you so much for doing that. Feel free to add a takeaway of yours from our conversation, something you'd like to reinforce or pursue more going forward. And as we wrap up, I'd like to invite perhaps our panelists, Juval, Lance, or Memo, or anyone else to share a final word before we wrap up our conversation together.
I'll share a quick quote. I just typed it in. It's a quote I jotted down from the conference I was just at, and it's about writing. And the quote is, "What is writing when it's about the statistical prediction of what a knowledgeable human would say in response to a prompt?" So it asks, what is writing? What does a knowledgeable human mean? And what is statistical? What does it mean when it's condensed down to only statistical predictions of that? From Antonio Beard, who is a professor at University of Missouri in Kansas City.
Thank you, and thank you for being here, Yetunde. And I will just share this idea of writing to think. Writing as a process that helps spark our own thoughts, imagination, creativity, meaning making, all of those things. I experienced that as a student, and when I was introduced to all sorts of things from free writing to the process of creation, and that was so meaningful to me. And just being able to understand the why of it and experience myself that creative power. Now I go to a writing group on Zoom that it's been meeting for 2 years throughout the pandemic, and it's so fulfilling. And it's like the type of thing that if it were for a grade, I would never have done. So I think that's a really meaningful thing. Megan.
Yeah, I'd just like to jump in and update what's going on in the chat as we're back channeling, marinating on these ideas together, both audibly and in text form using the Zoom chat. One question I wanted to amplify that fits well with the collaborative notes is what academic papers with data analysis do you recommend for authentic assessment, showing the value of authentic assessments over some of the more traditional assessments, which we're, now seeing shortcomings with, to some extent, with what the generative AI is capable of doing. So keep those resources coming and amplified if you have them. Another inconclusive question, but thought-provoking as kind of a closer here is, here we are discussing how to use artificial intelligence in the professional sphere, in the professional classroom. Have we yet come up with a definitive answer for how we use human intelligence in the professional sphere? Is that a question worth asking and entertaining as we're trying to articulate a way forward with this technology emerging?
Well, it's such a rich topic. I'm pleased that we're left with more questions than answers. Lance.
Yeah, I want to take up the thread that you had around like writing as a creation process. I want us to be careful about, like, many of us here are in academia, and so that is our process of creation, but the assumption that it's everybody's is both the danger and one of the pitfalls of creating certain types of exclusivity or privileging certain types of knowledge. And I'm coming at this from both having finished and just in general been thinking a lot about where I do a lot of my thinking, which is when I'm running. And I know my partner does a lot of her thinking in community. And so the book that I'm thinking about is The Extended Mind by Anne, I'm going to forget it, but Maha Bali, who is also cited in that document, has been writing about it. So I had to go listen to it as an audiobook. And so this is also a thing I think is interesting about these tools, is them becoming certain types of, whether it's written or as we move into audio and video, of like dialogue partners that we don't, that students don't necessarily have because of like the exclusivity of time. That is just the reality of instructors and stuff. So I think there is a really interesting element there in just the whole idea of how a tool like this can increase accessibility in ways that we are just starting to unpack. And that's another piece that, when talking with my students, has come up, is what this opens up for them. In terms of the tutor, as we saw previously, or in terms of just trying out ideas that, like, yeah, you're going to be afraid to say in your classroom. You're going to be afraid to say in front of your instructor because of those power differentials and stuff like that. So as skeptical and concerned and all of that I am about, as I said at the top of the hour, I still think there's some really powerful things this opens up for us and for many of our students.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lance. I do want to wrap up, but Memo, I see you unmuted. So do you want to share a final thought?
Yeah, I also wanted to conclude by one thing that Caitlin mentioned earlier about what data is used and the Wild West comment. That is one of my concerns as well. When GPT started, GPT-1, 2018, right, that was the paper outlining the architecture used, the parameters and everything. Next year, GPT-2 came out, again, I published a paper, model was available. GPT-3 was like 100 times the size of GPT-2, and we knew that because we knew the parameters used. Now GPT, but the architecture was not shared. Now we came to GPT-4, the most recent one, architecture is not shared, number of parameters is not disclosed. Every generation we're getting less and less they now we used even more data, but now we don't know which data is used. There are multiple reasons why they are afraid of people abusing it. At the same time, there's now more competitive market. Other companies are trying to compete. Whatever it is, there are no regulations for tools that are as powerful as there are right now. And yeah, I don't want to get political about that, but yeah, that's just a major concern. And I know Juval was talking about the bias and everything in there that definitely feeds very well into that.
Definitely. Well, thank you all so much for being here. I know it's a minute after 3, so I do want to wrap up, but I really appreciate our panelists coming in, everyone coming in and sharing your thoughts. And speaking of dialogue partners, we at the Teaching and Learning Collaborative are happy to be your dialogue partners and partners in teaching and learning, whether it's consulting with us or you know, if you want to have some sort of community of practice where we can continue these conversations, we'd be happy to facilitate that. You can reach out to us on our website or by email, teach@wit.edu. That's teach@wit.edu. And speaking of being in a relationship, this Guilt-Free Book Club group is going to read a section from Relation, you can't see it, but Relationship-Rich Education, How Human Connections Drive Success in College. So ways that we can get back to that human connection, that human intelligence in a time that artificial intelligence is taking off as well. Come back to our roots and the essence of what it means to be connected in a community of learning. So thanks again for joining us, to those of you here, to those of you watching the recording. Thanks for doing so, and we hope you'll be in touch, and we look forward to continuing this conversation in the months and weeks ahead. Have a great rest of your afternoon.